Welcome to the More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. Sponsored by BetterHelp.com. I'm Kevin Kelton, and as always, I'm joined by my friends Greg Matusak.
Thanks, Kevin. As I found out again, I prefer my national anthem in 3/4, not 4/4. Oh, my goodness.
Apparently that was a big thing right before the Super Bowl. And Ward Anderson?
I will always be Jenny from the block.
So, Greg, you were explaining to me before the podcast started that this is some kind of a controversy, that it was done in 4/4 instead of 3/4, and that a lot of music people took umbrage to
Okay,
that.
first of all, they're not music people, they're music nerds. And,
Okay.
there's two different ways you can usually, there's two standard ways to do the national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner, one is in 3/4, and that's your most standard basic way with a pickup on O, and then it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then the other way is what was done in tonight's, before tonight's game, is in 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, with kind of a 2 and 4 feel. And a lot of people take umbrage to that. It kind of gives it a more pop feel. There was extra beat taken away, and there might have been 2. It was either 2, 3, 4 right before the bridge. A lot of people hate that.
The national anthem is really hard to sing. I don't
it's
think
super hard to sing. You're right.
I think because we all just belt it out at sporting events, that people don't realize that to actually sing the anthem well, like the people that sing it publicly, paid professionals who do it, it's actually it's a difficult song to sing because it's got a long range, right? You have to sing very low and you also have to sing very high, and the notes are sustained very long. My only thing is that I always think, and part of me gets it because as an artist, you want to stand out and be remembered. But there's that part of me that goes, if I were ever to sing the national anthem publicly, I would just leave it alone and do it as straight as possible, because it's almost like if you can just get by being passable with the anthem, then you're fine. How many times do we hear something in the news about how someone did the national anthem some way and people hate it?
They tried to own it and they ruined it, yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? Everyone wants to be a Whitney. Everybody wants to say,
that's true.
I did it so well that it is now iconic.
You mean Bobby Brown?
Well, the most iconic, of course, is Roseanne Barr.
Oh, exactly. For the record, at Cincinnati.
Where she sang a horrible rendition of it and then spit at the end of it.
Oh yeah, she grabbed her crotch too.
Yeah, she grabbed her crotch.
Yeah,
that's right. Grabbed her crotch and spit. That's right.
I have performed the national anthem, in so many different forms and in so many different styles. And I've been asked to perform it solo, but I've never been asked to sing it solo. In fact, I think I was 15 or 16, I performed it solo on saxophone for my school. And I can remember saying, okay, I'm just going to do this straight. And right before they were like, just jazz it up a little bit. That'll be great. And it sounded terrible. I remember just scooping everything, just nightmarish. And people remembered it for being, what's that word? Bad. Yeah. Bad.
Since we're talking about the national anthem that happened at the Super Bowl, I'm going to call an audible and go a little off script right now, because you guys have set up, I think, a conversation that's, whether it needs to be had or just we're going to have it either way, the time has come, which is that, as Greg, and Ward, we're getting a lot of feedback on the new format. And some people were thrown, first of all, by the cast change, which we never fully acknowledged. We had a cast change in November, and Rebecca and DJ decided not to do the show anymore, and we're moving on without them. They did very long runs on the show, and we wish them well. But with that, Ward came in and is now a full-time regular. And when you have a cast change, whether it's in a sitcom whether it's on a Saturday Night Live, whether it's on, any type of a series per se. The show is going to evolve around the talent. And a lot of people have been PMing me or writing emails saying, we don't like it when you guys talk about stand-up comedy, or why don't you stick to politics? And by the way, we have a lot of politics coming up. We'll always have politics in the show. Believe me, you're going to get your fill of it tonight. But we just don't feel that this show needs to be all about politics. We did that for 5 years. It was getting, personally for me, a little stale. And I like these kind of impromptu conversations that we have. So I hope the audience can dig it too. It's a slightly different product, but we think it's a fresher product. And we hope you stay with us and maybe, you'll get into some of these conversations. Did I do a good job of summing that up?
Yeah. I mean, for the listeners out there, the whole reason I came on board was that it was going to be variety, right? And I think that some people out there want that. Some people may not, and there's nothing wrong with that. And, but formats change and shows change. And you guys did that, and here we are.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about it's going to be a great week. We have our second impeachment trial in just over a year. Trump was invited to testify. His lawyers said no. I'm not sure that door is closed yet. And also there's a question of whether there'll be other witnesses. Greg, do you think the Democrats should call witnesses? I think you may have answered this last week. I think you said that you think they should just get through it, right?
No. Actually, I think if I did say that, then
it must have been another podcast I do.
It might have been one of the many other podcasts I'm involved in. Then if so, I might have changed my answer by then. But in all honesty, we should have as many witnesses as we need. And to be honest, the Trump side should call as many witnesses as they need. One of the things we from the hearing of the Supreme Court, who was that?
Brett Kavanaugh?
Brett Kavanaugh. Thank you.
Brett Kavanaugh.
Brett Kavanaugh. Remember the Brett Kavanaugh hearings when they were like,
those weren't in the news very much, were they?
No. It was a blip. So the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, they really limited the number of witnesses. They limited the number of the investigation. They said, look, we'll investigate this, but we're only going to have like 5 people we'll interview. No. You know what? If we're going to do this in the scope of this, let's do this right. And I know there's a large group of people who, on both sides, who say, let's get through this quickly. Let's get this through. So let's do this in 10 days. No, this is of such importance that if this takes 6 months, it takes 6 months. If this interrupts Trump's golf game for 6 months, it interrupts his golf game. What else is he doing?
I want to build on what Greg just said, because I agree. The same people who for, I don't know how many years, 8 years, 12 years, 16 years, have been saying, Congress, they do nothing. They should close it up. The people that stormed the building to try to stop them from doing business are now going, this trial is going to get in the way of the Senate doing its job. It's like all of a sudden they have great reverence for the Senate doing its work.
It's the same people who are turning around saying, we can't spend $1.9 trillion. I know I'm jumping. We've got to be fiscally conservative. Now, after January 20th, we're fiscal conservatives now.
Well, yes, once again. And we will talk about that.
We'll talk about that in a moment.
As far as the impeachment goes, what I would like to say is that I think it should drag on as long as possible. We all know that he's not going to be convicted. Okay. But that's not the point. I think I said this last week. It drives me crazy when people try to compare it to a criminal trial or a civil trial. It's not the same thing. There is no burden of proof. There has to be evidence to blah, blah. There's none of that.
There's also no due process. And the senators keep coming on and saying he didn't get due process because there was no congressional hearings.
Yeah.
And that's BS. Keep going, War.
But that's just part of it, right? It's always driven me crazy when people start talking about this that I go, this isn't Law and Order, okay? This isn't what you watched on television. When people go, this whole impeachment thing is too political. I'm like, yes, that's the point. It is a political process. It's a political procedure, the whole point of it. And we don't talk about this, not just here, but anywhere. But impeachment was intended to be used frequently. It was intended to be basic and used frequently.
Right.
What I say is forget whether or not he's going to be convicted of it. Put everyone that you possibly can out there, have them testify under oath, and let the truth just get out there for people to know. Whether or not he's convicted, it's there in the history books. And that way we can all say, well, they can go, well, blah, blah, blah. I can go, okay, but you remember when so-and-so testified? There you have it. And that's what I want.
Great. And I want to build on what you said. Again, we're in what we used to call violent agreement on this show. Two things to buttress what you just said about it not being a legal proceeding. First of all, there's a reason that they're called the managers and not the prosecutors, because they are not prosecuting a criminal case.
Yep.
The second thing is, for those people who are listening to us and maybe still are not convinced and they think that this is some kind of a criminal proceeding, if the framers had wanted this to be a trial like a criminal trial, they would have put it in front of the Supreme Court.
Yep.
They didn't do that. They put it in Congress's hands. So that's why it's political.
That's why earlier today in Open Fire, which, by the way, for those who maybe aren't members of, this podcast comes to you from a Facebook group called Open Fire. Well, someone said, well, tell me what's criminal about that. And I go, that's just it. Impeachment doesn't have to have a crime. It can literally be a president can be impeached over his integrity or lack thereof. They can impeach just because they think he did something that was nefarious but legal. And so one of the things that frustrates me when it comes to impeachment is I just go, stop saying how you hate that it's political. That's the point. It's not a trial like what you see on TV.
Greg?
All right, to all good things must come an end, and this love fest. So this is coming to. This is where the train stops.
That's our show this week.
That's
friends.
our show. Thank you. Good night. Tip your waiters and waitresses. So as Ward said, he's like, this is gonna end. But I honestly think that this may actually end in a real impeachment. And the reason is, last year at this time, the Republican Party said, look, we'll keep an open mind, but he's innocent. Aha, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. This year, they're not saying that. All the Republicans in the Senate are saying this. Let's hear this out. And the reason is there has been mass exodus since January 6th from the Republican Party in all states. You see, like in Pennsylvania, 15,000 people have left the Republican Party on the day, like January 7th, since January 6th. And you're seeing this in key battleground states. People are leaving because they're associating the Republican Party with the insurrectionists. And unless the Republican Party puts some sort of like hole in the sinking ship, they are going to have to do it. And you know who might be that sacrificial scapegoat? Donald Jehoshaphat Trump.
Greg, you ignorant slut.
That's a whole different podcast that I do.
Now, the other question that comes up in terms of witnesses is whether the House managers might try to subpoena Trump. And I don't think that they would do that for this reason. If you subpoena him, obviously it's going to be challenged in court by his attorneys. So then you have to go to a federal court. And you don't want to go, the House does not want to go into some federal court where a judge can rule on the constitutionality of impeaching a former president. Because, some right-wing judge can just decide that he has the answer, and the answer is no, it's not constitutional, and then the House is truly screwed. So they don't want to, take that risk.
I agree with that. And on top of that, I just think they won't go to the trouble of it. Do you know what I mean? Like I agree that's all true. And at the same time, I also think they don't want to give right-wing media any more fodder. And they know that they'd be doing that if they went through all that.
Oh, I disagree. Once again, I'm going to be that guy tonight. Let's bring
Greg,
it on.
you ignorant slut.
I am going to be that guy.
But Rudy might testify. Maybe they'll call Don Jr.
Look, the right-wing judges that everyone was afraid of didn't stand by Trump during the election. Everyone was like, "Oh, we are so in trouble because the right-wing judges will throw the elections towards Trump," but they didn't. Right. And you know what? They all said, "Thank you for getting me in office. You know what I owe you? Nothing. I owe you nothing. Good day, sir." And that's what they're going to get.
The judges not doing it or doing it, that's not my point. I'm saying that, like Kevin said, I think that Democrats won't go forward with that under the fear that might happen, right? Yeah. Whether or not the judges would actually do it or not do it, I don't know. But I think that Democrats are thinking, you know what? I don't want to even guess on this stuff. Let's just not do that.
Right.
But the concept then that we could never impeach anybody who's out of office, that's like, once again, this could really impact them later on.
That's going to be a big part of the argument, and everybody who follows it the way we do knows that discussion is already being had. Where they say, if you buy that logic, then a president in the last month or last 2 months of his administration can do anything he wants because he knows the House won't be able to mount an impeachment and hear it in the Senate in time for the end of his term.
Right.
So it's counterintuitive, but that doesn't stop people from making the argument. Now, let me ask you guys this. There's going to be a trial, whether there's witnesses or not. Do you think there'll be any kind of an O.J. Glove moment? Do you think there'll be a moment where people kind of like, gasp and go, I didn't see that coming?
I'm going to say no, and I'm going to tell you because I think that unlike, say, Hollywood, Washington politics, they're bad at keeping secrets. And we would already know it if it was there. So
that's the as much as we could get into a trial that hasn't happened yet, but there have been developments on the Marjorie Taylor Greene front, and we spoke about her at length last week, but she's still in the news. 11 Republicans voted to kick her off. I was surprised, by the way, that the media coined it as, gee, the Democrats only got 11 votes. To me, that's a bipartisan vote. I'm surprised they didn't focus that more as a win.
Oh, I think it was a bipartisan vote. I think that they are finally standing up to her, and they're doing it in public. She is the new Steve King after 2019. But yeah, they are not going to let her have the power that, she could become dangerous. And remember, when Steve King got kicked off in 2019 from all of his committees, he lost re-election. He lost his primary. She will not have not only the political clout, but she will not be able to get the money either, that being on those committees.
See, my fear is the opposite. And I've been telling friends that my fear is that she could primary Brian Kemp and Trump might support her, and there might be a groundswell of support, and she might actually successfully primary Kemp and run for governor and potentially win there.
No. So, well, you know what? She could probably beat Kemp in a primary because Kemp is extremely unpopular, without a doubt. Kemp is
with the base now because Trump turned on him.
Yeah. Well, he was unpopular to begin with everything that's been going on. His policies for the past year. In addition, he has not been a good leader. But anyone who the Democrats put in, remember, it's Blue Georgia, as we all joke and say.
No, I'm not sure it's Blue Georgia yet, but
I think that with Marjorie Taylor Greene, we also really need to remember this, that right-wing scandals are brief, right? Like controversy with conservatives, they're brief. You're talking about anything with her right now, it's 4 weeks into her term. She's got 2 years for people to not give a shit about that. And that's what's going to end up happening. If she shuts up. And that's why I said it's too soon to tell.
I'm not betting on her shutting up.
That's super smart because people still bring up the fact that Biden steals speeches and is a plagiarist.
Not a Republican. Not a Republican.
Not a Republican. And yet
I said conservatives.
You're right. You're right. And
Republicans forgive quickly.
That's the smartest thing you have said all day. Write that shit down.
Well, now you haven't been speaking to him all day.
Well, no. In fact, he did.
He might have said something at 10:30 in the morning.
I know. For the record, listeners, I also called Greg very smart and talented.
He did say that. Like I said, that was smarter.
Oh, okay.
Well, you know what's a smart thing to do is to watch the impeachment, which we were just talking about, not on a network where you're going to just be hammered with one political viewpoint versus another, and it's going to be we're fair and balanced, and it's going to be no, they're not. How about watching the impeachment through a prism of no bias? And that would be with our new sponsor for this week, C-SPAN. So live on C-SPAN 2 this coming week, the historic second impeachment trial of Donald Trump is starting Tuesday, February 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Tune in for complete coverage of the Senate proceedings, beginning with opening arguments from both sides.
And in case you didn't know, the former president, Donald Trump, faces a charge of incitement of insurrection for his role in the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. That's what it's all about.
Yes, follow it all live and unfiltered on C-SPAN 2 online at cspan.org or on the free, that's awesome, C-SPAN radio app.
I am so used to paying for my C-SPAN, and now they're giving it away.
I know. Can you believe that? I've been a chump all those years.
And then when the trial is over, don't listen to any more media until next week's More Perfect Union podcast. We will tell you what happened, and we will tell you exactly what you should think about it. So don't go to the waste of energy of formulating your own opinions. Let us tell you what to think about it. No, not a good idea. Okay, so let's talk about COVID-19 for a little while. First of all, can't we update it and call it COVID-21 by now? Jesus Christ!
I think it's like that nickname you get when you're in middle school. You know,
it just sticks with you.
You know, you blow one goat and
you eat one foot and they call you cannibal. Yeah. So this is a question that's come up this week. Again, I saw it on Facebook, but I'm sure people all over the world are talking about it, which is once we've done the job of getting people over 65 and people with serious comorbidities mostly vaccinated, what do we do next? And I read an article where somebody was theorizing that because millennials are spreaders of the disease more than any other group, we should next move to vaccinating millennials, hoping that they'll catch less of it and they'll spread less of it. I personally think that that's ass backwards, but before I give my logic, I'll throw it to you guys. I've already kind of thrown my bias in there.
I want to hear your theory first.
Okay, well, it's not anything that's going to surprise you. Millennials are spreaders because they're being dicks and having 400-person raves without masks in somebody's pool in the Hollywood Hills or wherever they live. And I don't think that we should be rewarding them by giving them the vaccines so they can become even more dickish in their behavior. That's number one. Number two, from my understanding, if I understand the science, just because you are immune, you can still carry the virus in your nostrils and you can still spread it. So I don't even understand what it would accomplish by giving millennials the vaccine first. But my biggest reason, full disclosure, I am in the category of people that I think should get it next, people from 40 to 64. But here's why.
And you've had COVID-19.
And I already had COVID-19. But here's why. First of all, they vote more than any other group, so they're more civic-minded. They pay the most in taxes relative to other age groups. They're in the prime of their working careers, and many of them are stuck at home right now because jerks like the millennials are not wearing masks and are going to these massive parties. And they have, after people over 65, they have the highest incidence of morbidity. So my personal opinion is I think we should move down from the top age down. Now, there's one other way to do it if you wanted to make it totally fair and remove socioeconomic elements from who gets it. They can have a lottery, just like they had during the Vietnam War. Go by birthdays. Pick 365 birthdays out of a hat and give it in that order.
All right. So the only thing you forgot to say was get off my lawn.
Well, that's implied in everything I say, I think.
So you're right.
I'm still not a senior citizen, although I'm damn close.
And two, I know you will never forgive these people for voting for Bernie Sanders, but come on, man. All right, in all seriousness,
if they would just give him a binky, he'd be okay.
No, in all seriousness, no, Kevin, I agree with your initial statement. I do think that 40 to 65 should be the next one, but that's about where we end. As far as money and as far as work, that has nothing to do with as far as safety goes. But, I think the people who are the millennials, their survival rate and their morbidity rate is much lower. And that is, I think, the key factor.
Right.
And that alone, people of that age group. Now, people in the millennial age who have underlying conditions, diabetes, things like that, ding, 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 you go to the head of the line.
Yes.
Sure, without a doubt. And I think we all agree, but just because you are young and you don't have a job, that should not be an issue, okay? And the workforce itself, well, that's going to work itself out. I do believe 40 to 65 should probably be the next one because, like I said, morbidity rates are probably going to be higher. We also, 40 to 65, are more obese and have more health and heart issues and lung issues because we don't take care of ourselves as well.
Good point. So you're covering both criteria when you use that category, is what you're saying.
Right. And that's on us. The young people should be saying they shouldn't get it because we don't take care of ourselves. But that's not fair either.
Well, they don't take care of themselves either. They just happen to have the genes of youth.
Well, welcome to other things that aren't fair.
I do want to say this. Simply put, I think that the most susceptible to morbidity should get the vaccine first. So that...
But they're doing that now. The question is, what do they do once they've got 70 or 80% of those people covered?
All right. And I agree with you that it should be generational to a degree, right? But I just want to say, so I actually agree with that. I think it should go older and down because that is how it works. That's the most susceptible to getting and dying from the virus. But I do want to say real quick, millennials may be spreading this because of the fact that they're not social distancing and they're having raves and all that. But there is the argument to be made that they're also more susceptible to it because they're the ones delivering all of our food and doing all of the tasks right now while the rest of us quarantine.
I would have no problem with frontline workers getting it as well.
So
young or old.
I'm just saying that a lot of millennials are probably getting and spreading this, not because they're being careless, but because they're working. That's all.
And we're in agreement. I just want to say that the argument that I heard did not make that differentiation. Did not say we should give it to young people who are working. It was just, we should just give it to young people next because they're the biggest spreaders.
And I disagree with that because I think it should go to the most susceptible to morbidity.
Right.
So what about susceptibility and then occupation?
Yes, comedy writers first, former comedy writers before them. And I think animators and then jazz musicians. That makes sense.
Well, and this is the thing, though. When people talk about who is necessary and who is a frontline worker, for instance, I found out this week my brother got the vaccine already and is getting ready to have his second vaccine. And I said, "You're a computer programmer. You work in IT." And he said, "Yeah, I'm one of the heads of IT for a hospital." And that's when it hit me. It was like, oh, yeah, that hospital doesn't operate without him because everything that goes on in the hospital now is set up through the computer systems that he manages, right? So a lot of times we talk about like the front line and the essential workers, and we think about the doctors and the nurses, and of course that's true. But there's more people behind the scenes of even those people who are necessary that those people can't work without, right? And we don't think about, I didn't think about that. And we're talking about my own brother, right?
Okay, so the next up is the COVID plan, which apparently is actually making some progress. The Senate voted on a plan the other day. I think it's worth around $1.9 trillion, which is off from the $2.6 trillion that the Biden administration was originally pushing, correct?
Yeah.
And now it goes, I think, to the House, or it has to go to committee. And then, of course, they have to vote on the same exact bill. So there are more steps in this process. But one controversy that has come up is that a lot of people are upset because during the campaign and even after the presidential election, there was a lot of talk in the media on both the Republican side and the Democratic side about how we need to get those $2,000 payments out to the public, that $600 wasn't enough. It needs to be $2,000. And politicians started using $2,000 as a talking point, and people started to think, oh, they're talking about an additional $2,000, not another $1,400 to come up to $2,000. And then when they found out that actually the Biden administration was talking about the latter, now people are starting to feel gypped, right?
Yeah. So this new plan, this new $1.9 trillion plan will include a $1,400 check for Americans. There's still
for some Americans,
some Americans, and there's still some discussion about what the cutoff will be, whether it will be $75,000 or $150,000 for couples.
Or whether it'll be 50 and 100.
Right. Exactly. Right. So it's, one of those questions that hasn't been answered, but it's going to be probably $1,400, which is, hold on, let me get my fingers out, $600 less.
But it's not less because, again, the people, and I'm not blaming you, Greg, but I'm making a general conversation that the people who thought they were getting $2,000 more just misunderstood the conversation. And for them to go, oh, you're pulling the rug out on us now because you're only talking about $1,400. They're just too dumb to know that it was always an additional $1,400. Even when Trump was talking about it prior to the Georgia Senate runoffs, he wasn't talking about an additional $2,000. He was talking about bringing it up to $2,000.
Right. We all want what's best, and we would all like more money. Times are tough for everybody. It stinks, but we do have to be somewhat financially conservative, I guess.
Responsible. Yeah. I mean, there are people that still worry about the national budget, the national debt.
To be quite honest, I don't. It's
fine.
It's a number that is imaginary to me. 1.9 trillion is an imaginary number to me.
Right.
We're never, in my lifetime, I can't imagine us paying it off.
Well, there's a school of economic thought that kind of goes along with that. I don't want to simplify it too much, but essentially, modern monetary theory is something like that.
Yeah, but you know what is real to me? $1,400 and $2,000, and to say that I don't feel a little disappointed. I mean, $600 is 3 months of a car payment for me. It's a pretty nice car.
Well, everybody wants the money, and wherever you draw the line, it's probably going to be unfair. Listen, if you're single and making $70,000 a year, or you're a married couple and you're making $155,000, I'm sure you could use that extra money. I'm not saying that a couple with children that's making $155,000 in a major city is living, high on the hog, but there needs to be a cutoff someplace. I mean, yes, originally there was the idea of let's just send it to everybody and juice up the economy. But there's an economic argument to be made that extra money actually isn't getting anything done.
Right. The concept being is that at a certain point, people who do have money, if they get $1,400, or if they get $2,000, they're like, oh, this is great. We're just going to put this in savings. There's a lot of families who, when they get this money, they don't see a need to, pay rent that they haven't paid or buy groceries that they haven't done in a while. They just see it as, oh, put this in the savings because we may not have this in a year.
You touched on something that's in the news in a different way. Mitt Romney, a Republican and a supply-side conservative Republican, has been pitching this week a new plan that he's going to introduce in the Senate, if he hasn't already, that is providing, I think, up to $3,000 a year for children, for the parents of children, to support the children. In fact, I think it might be more for kids who are already, in kindergarten and above. And I was struck by a guy like Mitt Romney, who ran as a strict fiscal supply-side conservative in 2012, is now promoting a plan that's rather Marxist, if I've got my politics right. Isn't that interesting?
It's surprising for those. You know what it is Mitt Romney is odd to me because there's times when I think he's phony. You know what I mean? There's times when I go, Mitt Romney is a spoiled rich guy like everybody else. And then there's times I go, I think he really believes his faith. I think he deep down actually believes he's serving humanity and trying to do what's good for people and whatnot. He's an odd character for me because I don't know how I feel about him from one moment to the next. I wouldn't have voted for him, but I like him way more now than I did when he was running for president.
Well, again, I mean, everything that you guys are saying is right, but I just find it fascinating that a guy who is him and who thinks like him is pushing this, let's give people money because they're poor and we need to help them out. It's nice to finally see a pro-lifer who wants to do something for children born into poverty and and actually support them after they're born. So bravo on that.
Yeah, good for him.
And then one other thing that we wanted to, I'm kind of moving on because we got a little behind, but Lou Dobbs got fired this week from Fox News. I don't think too many people on the left side of the political spectrum are shedding any tears for him. Maybe some people on the right are.
I'm just laughing.
And do you think that it was the $2.7 billion lawsuit from the voting machines company that spurred Fox to do this? And by the way, immediately, it's not like they said, "Oh, we're sunshining his show," or he's done on such and such a day. They pulled him that day.
By the way, they have since said they were planning on doing this, supposedly.
Bullshit.
Yeah,
Bullshit.
Exactly. Yeah.
They were planning on pulling their highest rated show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The number one show they had. Oddly, I used to really like Lou Dobbs, right? There was a time when
I remember liking him, but we're talking about 6-8 years ago. Yeah.
Exactly. But there was a time when I used to hear him guest on talk radio programs I listened to, and I thought that he was really rational. I like the way he talked about things. And I remember him talking about Trump before Trump was elected, like when Trump first put his hat in the ring. And I remember how he admired Trump in that conversation. And I remember going, well, this is odd to me, because I've heard Lou Dobbs plenty, and he always seemed like kind of a middle of the road kind of, I don't know, old white conservative nerd. And in that, I mean, like, fiscally conservative, but generally amiable kind of guy. And it's weird how that changed because now I see him as a parody of himself.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, speaking of people being fired, Ward, you shared with us an interesting story about something that happened in Canada this week. You want to tell the listeners?
Well, obviously COVID-19 has had a disastrous effect on, I want to say entertainment, but I should say public broadcasting of any kind, from the media to, television media to the news or whatever. It's not just that people aren't going to movies anymore or whatever, but, consumption of things like talk radio is down because people aren't driving. They're not going to work. And that was where most people would listen to such things. So in Canada here, there's two major media corporations. There's Rogers and Bell. They laid off 200 people this past week, including members of the media that have been in their positions for like 20 years. Talk radio, news anchors, news reporters, whatever. But what floored me was finding out that they were fired by robocall.
Wow.
No kidding.
And that it wasn't just that all these people were laid off. It's that they were laid off by being told, call into this number because there's important information about what's going on in the company or what's going on with you or whatever. I don't know the full details, but that's how they were essentially given the blow. And it reminds me of, if you guys saw that movie Up in the Air.
That's
Did you guys see
exactly
that?
what it reminds me of. Yeah.
In Up in the Air, there's a whole thing in that movie about firing people through video calls so you don't have to do it in person. Right. And it reminded me of that people called in and they were told that they were laid off because of all of this, and further information about their severance was forthcoming.
And what made it even worse was the call ended with, "And I'm Lindsey Graham, and I approve this message."
But now let me ask you, at the end, some people have said this is crazy. I think in some ways crazy, but some people have told me they would prefer it that way, than being called into an office and told. What do you guys think?
Well, I've been fired the old-fashioned way, and you know what? This way might be better.
I got fired once I was playing in a band, and things didn't work out. And I had been playing in this band for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, and they fired me by letter, and which really sucked. And because I knew these guys were, it was a band I was playing in. And I called them up and I was like, what's going on, guys? And they're like, oh, we just thought this would be easier. And I was like, no, it's not. And, they typed it up even.
They thought it was professional.
Yeah, they thought they were like, this is how adults do this. And we were all adults. We were in our mid-20s. 30s, and they were like, this is how you do things right. So there was a paper log, and I have been fired from other jobs where they just pull me in and they're like, hey, you weren't meant to be a bouncer, and that was actually happened too.
By the way, for the listeners that don't know, that band that fired him by letter, Smash Mouth.
Oh my goodness. Right before they went big.
So I just want to say real quickly, I worked for a big media company and I was fired, and I was done by being told, hey, we have to talk about your contract because we're thinking about giving you a raise and extending it.
No.
Yeah. And then I was called into a meeting to talk about the extension of my contract. And when I walked into the room, they sat me down and said, your contract is terminated. You're no longer needed.
Wow. That's cold.
Because, they knew that bringing me into the room, it would be easiest to bring me into the room and not have any conflict or have me questioning why I was being brought in. If I was being given information, if I was being told that it was good news I was going in there for. And by the way, for the record, I knew I was getting fired. Like, despite the fact that they were like, hey, we're going to go talk about your contract. I read the body language of everybody telling me that, and I went, oh no, I'm getting fired. and I was.
I'll take an in-person firing every time. You can look someone in the eye, and it's less of a chance to freak out, and you can at least conduct yourself in a way that's professional.
No, I think Kevin's right. I think you'll be more professional if you get it as a letter and you have time to break shit around your house and then send back that email that says, thank you very much.
Well, generally when there's mass firings, not every time, but generally, and I've been involved in at least 2 of those that I can remember, ahead of time, even though you don't know precisely, and maybe 30% or 50% of the company is going. I hope I'm in the half that's not going, but you kind of know.
Well, let me ask you that, Kevin. I'm sorry, but I to interrupt you, but I'm curious about this, okay? George Carlin had a famous bit where he said, I never got a pink slip. Some guy just walked over to my desk and went, get the fuck out of here. But I've had that. And as a comedian, a touring comedian, there is no politeness about it. It's usually someone just comes right up and goes, "We don't fucking want you here." You know what I mean? But as a comedy writer and TV producer, and especially pre-internet, like nowadays you do hear about cancellations through emails and things like that. But how would they tell like a show that's been canceled and you're all out of work? Would it be this kind of chainmail? Like, how did they do that?
Oh, well, yeah, because there are no mass firings on a show unless you get canceled. Usually if your contract isn't being picked up, they do it through your agent or manager. But when you get canceled, yeah, the network tells the production company and you hear about it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I once I had done a season on a show called Something So Right for NBC, and it was scheduled to be picked up, and I went on this very expensive vacation at the Four Seasons Hotel with my then wife, and in fact, just a day before we left, we found out that we were expecting our first child, and here I'm dropping thousands of dollars a day on this vacation, and while we're in the hotel, I get a call from not my agent, but a friend of mine who was an agent, who said, "Gee, I'm so sorry about what happened with your show," and I'm going, "What happened with my show?" And he said, "You don't know?" I said, "No." He said, "Call your agent." I said, "But Elliot, what happened with my show?" He said, "Call your agent."
Oh,
and I called my agent, and it had been taken off the schedule at the last minute.
Oh, wow.
But there are 2 times since my comedy writing days when I was working in a more traditional industry, I worked for companies that went through mass firings. In one, everybody got an email at like 11 a.m. And this was actually November 7th, 2000. It was the day of the presidential election. And that's why I remember it so clearly. Everybody got an email and it said, "Show up at from a company meeting at such and such a time." But for some people, it was like 11:30, and for other people, it was 12:45. And you looked around and you said, "Did you get an email about this?" "Yeah." What time did they tell you to come in?" And you figured out pretty quickly from, who was in your group. You knew whether you were gone or not. So that's how that one went down.
Wow.
And then you went into this meeting, and the people that went in first were told that they were staying, and they were told to leave immediately.
Oh,
Get your stuff and leave, so there's no awkwardness with your coworkers. And we knew going into that next meeting that we were about to be laid off. So, they never take you by surprise. In another company that I was at, the same thing, they let about 35% of the company go. Maybe it was even a little higher percentage than that. And first they announced the layoffs, and they said, "And next week we're going to bring people in individually and discuss, your future with the company." So you got a week to absorb, hey, my job might be over. So by the time next week came around, again, you pretty much had a feeling which side you were on. Some people were surprised to find out that they were on the keep side, but I had a kind of a feeling that I wasn't, and I was right.
And my getting laid off by that media company was such an eye-opener because I'm not a splurge guy. I'm not that person that gets the big payday and goes out and celebrates or buys the big thing or whatever. And so we're talking about years of working for some company, and I'd never splurged. And like literally 2 days before I was fired, I had told the guy that fired me, like, "Look at this thing I'm buying," and blah, blah, blah. And it was the one time in my life I was going to splurge on something. And it was 2 days later, he's looking at me across the table and telling me I'm done. And I'm like, well, now I have to sell the DeLorean that I just
let me tell you something very interesting. That company that I worked for, where they told people you're being laid off, we were an ethics and compliance company. We wrote courses for other companies to teach ethics to their employees. Now, there's a lot of jokes to be had about that. We'll bypass those. But one of the situations that we dealt with was when you know that a coworker is probably going to be laid off and they're telling you that they're about to, they're thinking of buying a house, and that their job is on the line, but you are not supposed to tell them. What do you do?
So what do you do? I mean,
well, this is interesting because generally ethics is pretty black and white when you remove your own ego and your own desires from it. But in this case, the corporate ethics is you don't tell them because you have information that is not supposed to be publicly disseminated. That's the corporate ethical viewpoint. But if you're looking at it from a friend viewpoint and a humanitarian viewpoint, you might come to a different ethical conclusion. So we would teach people that the right thing to do was not to tell them, not to disclose it. But I'm not sure that that's what I would have done in that situation.
That's a shitty thing to do to someone.
Yeah. Instead, you start going, oh, I'm not sure about that house.
Yeah, I think it's haunted.
You're sure
man.
you want to live in that neighborhood?
I hear asbestos is a real problem, and that'll.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the other thing that you could do, and I seem to remember this from the scenario, is that you could go to your supervisor and say, I happen to know that Bill is about to make an offer on the house. I have this information and I can't share it with him, but I'm asking you to. So, and then they have to make a decision.
So what we're trying to say, dear listeners, is you're fired.
No, hopefully we're not. Well, listen, we've gone very long. I've really enjoyed this episode. Some free-flowing conversations that were interesting to me. I hope they were interesting to you guys, and I hope they were interesting to our listeners. And next week, we're going to have our big either post-impeachment podcast or mid-impeachment podcast. Either way, we'll be talking impeachment. So tune in then. We want to thank you for listening. Don't forget our Facebook group, Open Fire Politics, where we discuss politics between shows, and you're welcome to join us there. And guys, like I said, I love doing this podcast with you every week, and thank you for doing it with me. And listeners, thank you for listening. Anything you guys want to add?
I think I'm going to start a company this week where all I do is fire people. Mostly it's a robocall thing. I just send out robocalls in MailChimp. But you guys can get in on the ground floor.